kójókójó làbẹ́wò ìkúkú dùkú lóko Podium International wọ́n ti wà tipẹ́tipẹ́ látìgbà tí wọ́n ti ń bàbọ̀ wọn ò fìgbà kan tẹ́rì o wọ́n ti wá ṣe bẹ̀bẹ̀ wọ́n ti gbé bẹ̀bẹ̀ dé Podium Cinema ni wọ́n tún gbé dé Podium Cinema lórí YouTube ẹ fọ́lọ̀ wọn kẹ́ ẹ láìkì wọn kẹ́ ẹ subscribe ibẹ̀ lẹ́tì mọ̀ wọ àwọn àjá àbálẹ̀ fíìmù ẹ̀dọ̀kí fíìmù tó léfo gan tààrà Podium Cinema mo bẹ́rí fún yín fíìmù mẹ́sàn-án ọ̀tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ ni wọ́n kó jáde o àwọn gbàǹkọ́gbé fíìmù èkíní májẹ̀mú ẹ̀gbọ́n èkejì my wet ẹ̀kẹta ọmọ ẹni ẹ̀kẹrin àlàmú èkó ẹ̀karùn-ún àìmọ̀ ṣe wá rí pé nǹkan kì í ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ ràgbó ó kọjá bẹ́ẹ̀ eléyìí lẹ́ti kẹjù èdè Yorùbá ni wọ́n fi ṣe àwọn fíìmù yìí ẹlẹ́ẹ̀kẹfà sẹ́ẹ̀kẹsàn-án èdè òyìnbó ni wọ́n kọ́ ẹ̀kẹfà tẹ́mà èkeje the casting ẹ̀kẹjọ M1 the detective ẹ̀kẹsàn-án 100 M1 the detective at 100 orí síríìsì lẹ́fì máa wò ó ìyẹn dàgbéléwò nìyẹn Podium International Podium Cinema ẹ fọ́lọ̀ wọn kẹ́ ẹ láìkì wọn lórí YouTube wọ́n wà lórí Facebook wọ́n wà lórí Instagram Podium Cinema ó ti dọbẹ̀ ẹ subscribe.
Welcome to today's program, The Analysis. So we've got episode 5 today, and we'll be looking through the Yoruba system of government during the time of the colonial reign. Last week, I did promise us that we'll look into Erba in particular. So we'll look at Erba and briefly about the Yoruba kingdom, because there were two different kingdoms in those times. The Erba were about 250,000. The Yorubas, which is the Oyo, Ogbomoso, Ilaro, and stuff, were over 1 million people. If you go back to the analysis I did last week, Wednesday. So for those who are joining us for the first time, we've done episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can go back and watch each episode up until today. So I'm not going to go to the recap like I normally do because we didn't have much time to digest the analysis last week. So today I'm just going to go straight into the business for the day. So I talked about Erba during the time of the colonial rule, and that Erba was the only jurisdiction in Yoruba that was not part of the amalgamation of 1st of January 1914. So Erba joined in September of 1914, and there was a reason why Erba's joining the amalgamation in September instead of January 1st. And there was a trick Lugard used to force Erba. So Erba today would have been an independent nation. Erba would have been like a Lesotho within South Africa, or Erba would have been like a Vatican within Italy. So, but Erba was, however, joined into Nigeria. So we're going to look into that today and look at it vis-a-vis the kind of reign, the kind of government they ran. Because the Yorubas were running, it was like a parallel government. So there was a Yoruba government and there was a colonial government. The same thing in the north. So if we have time, I might touch on the northern government style, what British adopted with. So for those who are just joining us, or we are on page 12 today. Item, and the item we're looking at is item 17. Treaties in the Lagos hinterland, jurisdiction of the crown. So Lugard was trying to look at the treaty they signed. So this was, he was trying to look at the treaty. You know, in our first episode, I talked about the treaty they were signing with all these regions. So they signed a treaty with Alaki, 1888. They signed a treaty with Alaki. They signed a treaty with Ilaro. they signed a treaty with different kingdoms in Yoruba land. And they were not suspecting that the British had a bigger picture. British did not tell them their plan. Britain did not say, okay, this is what we're planning, this is what we want to do, or this is how we want to do it. Britain was just saying, oh, we're doing this because of trade. So Erba was the only one who signed a treaty of independence. So for those who are asking, oh, how come Erba did not, Erba, Alaki was the only one who did not sign a treaty, who signed it. So the treaty he signed was a treaty that Erba would remain independent, and that gave Britain a whole lot of headache. And that is why Erba was not added to Nigeria on the 1st of January 1914. The letter came in September, and I will tell us the trick. So stay with us, and we will see how Erba's hand was twisted and forced into the jurisdiction of Nigeria. So the Erba Treaty of 1893 purported to guarantee the independence of the tribe. That was Lugard writing, on condition that they encourage trade and Christian missions, but made no mention of international obligations incurred under the Brussels Act. We're not going to play the act now, but we'll play it in some few minutes for you. So this, it was to protect wild animals and things, but basically it was because of slave trade. So the British and other European empires or emperors or whatever, what they were trying, what the narrative they gave into colonizing Africa was they wanted to stop slave trade and bring civilization. But we've had our own civilization and our own ways of governing ourselves before. So Lugard now, he appointed a deputy to look into all these matters for him and say, I found that no one, neither the colonial office nor the chief justice, had any clear idea as to what jurisdiction could legally be exercised by the crown. So that when they say crown, in the UK, we understand that the crown means the monarchy. So exercised by the crown means that who could exercise, what could the King of England exercise as a right in Nigeria? So he said he wasn't sure of all the treaty that is signed. So he appointed a deputy to look into all these matters for him. Now, this deputy went in, looked into it, and saw that there was about 89 treaties that were signed with Britain. Now, when Britain signed this treaty with these kingdoms also had treaties among themselves, like the Erba Treaty with the Oyo Empire. So Erba and Oyo signed a treaty of friendship and peace. So since the two of them have a treaty together, before Nigeria or Britain or Lugard could sign a treaty with Erba, they have to renounce the treaty they signed with Nigeria. I don't know if you understand what is happening here. So just like two of us are friends, we have a binding document. To invite a third party, we either have to break that first agreement and sign a collective one, or I go and sign a separate agreement with him, and you go and sign a separate agreement with him. So that's basically what happened without confusing us any further. So he said, but what he now summarized, what the deputy summarized, that His Majesty, the King of England, has now acquired such complete jurisdiction throughout the protectorate, that's the north and the south. And I told us the way they acquired it was some were by treaty and some were by conquering. So there were some places they conquered, like Benin Kingdom, they conquered, the Efik, they conquered, the emirs in the north, they conquered. In the south, majority of the places, they signed a treaty. So what he's now saying is, we now own all this place. He said, His Majesty has now acquired. So if you go to page 12, the item 17, such complete jurisdiction throughout the protectorate with the possible exception of Egba land. So it was clear there as to be able to legislate in any direction, not only for European and resident non-natives, but for the natives themselves. And said the establishment of British courts throughout the protectorate appears to me to be essential. So this is what Lugard was saying, that his own. So what the Britain brought was they brought their own judicial system. Remember that we have our own customary system, our own customary court. So in order to bring their own supremacy, they have to bring the Supreme Court into the system. So once they can be able to bring the Supreme Court into your system, then they control you. So that was a way Britain was using to establish their authority. So Lugard here was saying the establishment of British courts throughout this whole territory, whether in Egba, whether in Nigeria, whether in Oyo, whether in Kano, is very essential to him, and he must achieve it. So that is what Lugard had purported in his heart of hearts. So we now go to the executive powers and who holds power and how the power is going to be utilized. Now, he said, so for, if I'm not confusing us, I told us last week that in the north, there were 13 provinces, and in the south, there were 9 provinces. Now, in these places, in the provinces, so I know because we are using local government, we're using governors, it may be confusing, but let's take our mind back to 1912, 1913, and 1914. There was no governor. We didn't start having governor until 1967. But what they used then was governor general. So governor general was like the president. So let's cast our mind back to 1914 mentality. So the areas they have then, it was just north and south. But within the north, they had 13 provinces, and within the south, they have 9 provinces. Now, in each province, they had a resident or a commissioner. So it was when he became governor, it was cumbersome on how to do it. So majority of those residents were taken away because he feared that their powers may subsume the lieutenant governors. But he wanted to give the lieutenant governors more power over their jurisdiction. So we had only 2 lieutenant governors, one in the north and one in the south. So he had residents. So he wanted to do away with the resident. So he now narrated that for the natives, there were a lot of bribery, there were a lot of corruption, there were a lot of hanky-panky, and what happened was the Abeokuta kingdom, the Egba people, we have Oba and we have chiefs, which we call it Joyes. Now, the Joyes, what they do is they can just arrest somebody and throw that person into prison for crimes they don't even know, which is what is happening today. You go to the police station, if you go, I bet you, if you go to the Nigerian prisons, you will see half of people who do not know the crimes they've committed. So Lugard was looking at what is going on here. All these people. So what is happening is that Egba was seeing what Nigeria was doing, or what Britain was doing in terms of ruling Nigeria, and they want to replicate it. That if you're doing this, which we are doing it, like, will I say copy? So they were doing that, and there was a way that they were doing it that Lugard himself did not like. So the other governors who had come before Lugard, they've sort of like allowed it to go on, but what happened was nobody was sure what Egba's role was was at the time. So they were practicing like an hybrid of government. So they were having part of the colonial rule, and they were also having the traditional rule. So Lugard now did something. Lugard said the colonial government had, however, declined to allow these communities to maintain their own armed forces. So as Egba was, they were not allowed to maintain their own armed forces or have their own police. And he said the absolute necessity of this restriction, apart from obligation under the Brussels Act, can only fully be realized by those whose experience has taught them how strict must be the discipline and how watchful must be the control exacted over armed Africans. So Lugard here was referring to a Brussels Act that was formulated by the King of Belgium for the Congos. So the King of Belgium, because the Europeans too were afraid that armed Africans could rebel when they see the power of what the gun could be. So if my producer is available, I'm just going to beg her to help me play that Brussels Act of 1890 so that we see what it says in it, so we understand the act, and then I'll come back to explain it for us.
The Brussels Conference Act of 1890, full title, Convention Relative to the Slave Trade and Importation into Africa of Firearms, Ammunition and Spirituous Liquors, was a collection of anti-slavery measures signed in Brussels on 2nd of July 1890, and which entered into force on 31st of August 1891, to, as the Act itself puts it, put an end to Negro slave trade by land as well as by sea, and to improve the moral and material conditions of existence of the native races. The negotiations for this act arose out of the Brussels Anti-Slavery Conference 1889-90. The act was specifically applicable to those countries who have possessions or protectorates in the conventional basin of the Congo, to the Ottoman Empire and other powers or parts who were involved in slave trade in East African coast, Indian Ocean and other areas. For example, Article 21 describes the zone in which measures should be taken, referring to the coasts of Indian Ocean, including the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, the Beluchistan up to Tangaloin, Kiaman, and Madagascar. The Act provided for the establishment of a relevant international bureau in Zanzibar. In Article 68, the powers recognise the high value of the law on the prohibition of slave trafficking of blacks, issued by His Majesty the Emperor of the Ottomans on 4th to 16th of December 1889, and are assured that a surveillance action will be taken by the Ottoman authorities, especially in the western part of Arabia and on the routes that keep that coast in communication with other possessions of His Imperial Majesty in Asia. Similar actions were called on to be taken by the Shah of Persia and the Sultan of Zanzibar, Articles 69 and 70. The participants also agreed to stop the sale of guns and other weapons to Africans.
Thank you very much. What has happened here is the act sought to bar Europeans from selling guns to Africans so that they cannot maintain a good military, and more so, they cannot police themselves. And the fear was that, I know it was an excuse that if you give African guns, they will start killing themselves, but that's a lie. So Lugard was saying here that he does not see a reason why we say these people have power, but the necessary instrument to maintain discipline, law, and order has been denied them. And that is the same thing that is happening in Nigeria today. When people are clamoring for state police, they tell you, oh, no, you don't need a state police because we have a federal police. No, it is a deliberate attempt to see that people don't govern themselves. Because why? There's a reason. And that was the reason how Erba was brought into Nigeria. And I will go into that now so that we understand the reason fully. Now, the Erba government was run by the Alaki, who was a loyal, well-disposed person to the British. But Lugard described him as an illiterate chief. So, who also has chiefs who are elderly people, and perhaps the only educated among them. I don't know why he say illiterate. If somebody is not gone into conventional school, does not mean that they've not learned the art of governance. But he said it's only the clerk that had English knowledge. So it's only the secretary that could understand what they write and could read. So, and he described these chiefs that they are very idle. They're not doing anything, but they live a lavish life. So what they're doing is they're collecting royalties from the people. So within Erba now you know that Nigeria now has its own jurisdiction. So within Erba, there was a custom post. All the things that were coming, there was a custom post. So they had their own custom officers. So any trade, any goods that is coming into Erba, they collect their own tax on it. And of course, they were very corrupt. So we're not going to deny that. So they were very corrupt and very extortionate, taking high demands on people. And these chiefs, they were more than over 2,000. So imagine how they're feeding their largesse, they're feeding their ego and everything on the back of the poor peasant. Call them poor peasant. I don't know why I call them peasant. No. Yeah. So what they now do now was anytime there is trouble in the land, they will use the name of the Alaki to go and call the Nigerian police or the colonial police officers to come and arrest the people. So that was what they were doing. They had no jurisdiction. Remember, Erba is an enclave on its own. They wanted to behave like Nigeria. They wanted to behave like what they were saying. So they go in the name of Alaki to call police to arrest the people. So this thing was going on, and the people were not liking it. So the lieutenant governor was always attending to that. But sometimes they don't know what is even caused the trouble. They don't know what has caused the trouble. But these Egba people, they are very rich people. Most of the Egbas, they're very rich people. And that's because they're close to Lagos. They've been trading with Lagos. And so they've made money for themselves. Now, Lugard talked about the Yoruba government, which I'm going to skip for now, because he talked about which is the Alafin, because he said on the contrary, the Alafin was an enlightened Alafin, and a lot of Yoruba owed him a lot of allegiance. So I'm not going to describe too much on Alafin, but I might come back to that if there is time. So if we go to point 21, which was the demand for government troops at Abeokuta. So the demand for government troops. Now, this is now how Lugard was able to force the Alaki to sign treaty with Nigeria. So in 1912, there was a riot in Abeokuta. So what happened was Lugard now capitalized on this riot. So there was a riot in 1912. There was another one in 1913. So when there was a riot in 1912, the Alaki asked Lugard for help, that I need the Nigerian soldiers to come help me. Now, what had happened was, within the past maybe 15 to 20, 30 years, no Alaki has ever stayed on that throne for more than 3 years. And what happened is every Egba person had a gun. So if you remember recently, when they were telling people that you have to drop your gun, they had a plan. Because it was the same script book that Lugard used. It was the same thing that the colonial masters used. So every Egba man or woman had a gun. All of them, they had a gun. So you don't joke with any Egba person. They are ready to defend themselves. So he called the Nigerian government. So normally Egba is supposed to have their own police and have their own army, but they deny them all these things. So what there happen is, when there's trouble like that, they have to call the Nigeria police or army or territorial defense or whatever name. So Lugard was obliging them. So when the one in 1913 now happened, Lugard now said, see, I will not send the police or the army again to stop riots in Abeokuta, except you agree to put Egba under the crown. So that was what Lugard, because if we go back to item 17, it said the establishment of British courts throughout the protectorate appears to me to be essential. So he has been eyeing that Egba is the last man standing and Egba must fall. So and he was very patient. If you look at the British and the Fulani, they have two things in common. They are a very patient people. They don't rush for things they know they want. So what in the very early on, they define what they want. They define their goal and they say, this is how we want to get, this is where we are going to. It doesn't matter whether it takes them 10 years. It doesn't matter whether it takes them 20 years. It doesn't matter whether it takes them 30 years. They have that goal. And they will be pursuing it slow and steady. So in our very first episode, I told us where they started from in 1825. In 1825, they started and said they wanted the coast. From 1825 till 1851, 1855, they started pursuing. It wasn't until 1861 they had the opportunity to now strike a deal with Oba Dosumu and took over Lagos. So Oduduwa said, the Egbas dealt in selling slaves. I know a building part of the land was given to colonials. A nursery school was built on it. Today, Egbas love selling humans as slavery. Yeah, They were said they was all the guns they had was not for, they were just capturing people and said, and that's the sad part of it. Because we said a lot of the slaves that were sold during the colonial times were sold by Africans, sold by Yoruba people, and sold by the Hausa and the Fulani people in the north. So people were capturing their brothers and sisters. So Lugard was saying here, so Lugard told the Alaki, he says, see, you're just calling me every time to arrest people. The crimes they commit, I don't know. The offense they've committed, I don't know. So why should I be arresting them and putting them in jail for crimes that I don't know what they've committed? Now, give me your territory. Agree to sign your territory to be under the crown. Then we can establish our own British courts there, so that if anything happens, we would be able to protect you. We'll take them to court, we'll judge them accurately, and decide whether they've actually committed that offense or not. So, and the Alaki agreed. Now, when the Alaki agreed, Lugard did something, because he said the way Erba will be governed would be similar to the way the North is being governed, which I would explain during the course of this program today, hopefully, if we still have enough time. So that was what he told the Alaki, and the Alaki agreed, because like I said, no Alaki has ever survived more than what's it called? No Alaki has ever survived for more than 3 years. And this present Alaki too was also looking that himself might not survive the onslaught if he was allowed to stay, because the Egbas were not having any of it. So what then happened was first, so if you go to item 22, we'll go back to the item 20, but let's go to the item 22. So the abolition of the Erba and the Ibadan Treaty. So once the Alaki has agreed, he called it Alaki, but that's typo on his part, or maybe that's how he's written it from the pronunciation. So he said once it's agreed, then the treaty and the ordinances they signed between Erba and Oyo, which is Ibadan, had to be repealed. So they repealed that one and then went, so they now signed a treaty with Erba. So we're going to look at that treaty. It's in page 75 in appendix 2. So an Erba land consists then of Erba land, Ijebu, Ilaro, Meko. So what he now did was he now made those places a province. So once they've agreed, he made them into a province under a resident with their usual staff. So the fiscal frontiers and the native government custom staffs were then abolished. So there was no, Erba was doing hybrid before. They would take some part of British rule and take some part of, so they were doing this hybridization. That the Alaki was like the head of state. But now that the Alaki has agreed to be under the protection of Lugard, or the crown, or British rule, it was no longer the head again. So now they abolish all the customary systems that they're using. So they now form them under a resident. So, and then they did the same thing. So now they removed the system in Oyo, so as well, because the treaty between Erba and Oyo has been repealed. So they had to do a similar system with Oyo as well. because Oyo's, what's it called? Oyo's treaty was not a treaty of independence. Oyo's treaty was just a treaty of trade, and that the British would be given first refusal rights. So what the refusal right means is that if I want to sell my phone, or I want to sell this, it is the British that would first decide that they want it or not. If they want it, fine. If they don't want it, that is when they can then sell it to other Europeans. So then it was not considered to substitute any agreement for Oyo. So if we look at if we go to page 75 quickly, we can look at that treaty. So, and I did mention previously that the areas where we call Sudan today, when I say Sudan, the areas where we call Niger Republic today is not Niger back then. Back then it was known as French Sudan, and I told us that he had contemplated naming us Sudan. So if you look on page 74, you see the name of Niger Republic, which was French Sudan. So Lugard, Mrs. Shaw had a lot of people have contemplated Sudan for us, but Lugard, Mrs. Shaw or Miss Shaw said, no, why should we call them not Sudan or Sudan of any form? We already have the Sudan we know now, and the South Sudan that broke off from Sudan. We already have French Sudan. So there's no place in Africa that's been called a Negro area. So let's just give them a Negro area. And that's how they came with the name Nigeria. And then we became a Negro area. So the law was, the treaty was here. So it was abrogation of the Treaty of Egbaland. So the treaty was signed on the 18th day of January. So that was it. So the first one was they abrogated the law. The treaty Egba signed on the 18th of January 1989, known as Treaty of Friendship and Commerce. So Egba and Ibadan signed a Treaty of Friendship and Commerce. So and the treaty was made in Abeokuta between His Excellency Gilbert Thomas Carter, companion of the most distinguished, blah, 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 blah. Whereas the colony of Lagos has merged in His Majesty the King of Britain's colony of Nigeria. And whereas the King, Alaki, and the authorities of Abeokuta desire the assistance of the government of the colony. So he's writing it here, and Protectorate of Nigeria to maintain law and order in the Egba Kingdom. And that the said treaty of the 18th day of January 1980, so it's a 1893, so 1893, not 1983, sorry, be annulled, and that a new agreement be entered into between themselves and the governor of the colony and Protectorate of Nigeria. So why can't you just allow Egba form their own police? Why can't you just allow Egba have their own army, and then they can protect themselves? Why do they have to come under Nigeria before they can protect themselves? So you see how the British use arm twisting to collect all these colonies, collect all these territories. And these territories, they didn't even sign to say they want to become a Nigeria or whatever. They just wanted protection. And what do we have today in Nigeria? You see a lot of our folks not being protected. People, the rate of kidnap now is more than the rate of kidnap ever known to mankind. People can no longer sleep in their houses safe just because they are Nigerians. People can no longer sleep with their two eyes closed. Now you're traveling, you're not even certain whether you will get to where you are going. So they signed a new treaty, and then Lugard signed it, Boyle, Edun, Young, then Solanke was the interpreter who interpreted everything for the Egba monarch. So we're going to come back to that. Now, when Lugard did this, Lugard did it in such a way that Egba practiced the same system that they were practicing in the north. You know, I told you it was a different system entirely that were being used in the north and south. It was a different system entirely. Now, in the north, when so what they do in the north, what Lugard did in the north was that as much as they have the residents, so what they were doing is they would look for a powerful person, make him so popular. They were using direct indirect rule for the north. So they will look for a powerful person, make him popular, and then put him under a vast area of space. When I say powerful person, local, like an emir or whatever, and put quite a lot of officers under him. I'm going to come into that for where it's in the book because it's under revenue. They'll put all the areas under that one person, centralize it. So that person is the all in all. The British were not dictating what he would do to him, but they have the resident. The resident is just like the representative or the chairman or the whatever you want to call him. That resident is not to tell that emir what to do. That emir will do whatever he wants to do. He will collect all the money, but he will pay shakole to the British government. That was the system they were using in the north, which was different from the system they were using in the south. The system they were using in the south was that they have officers, they have courts, they have all their paraphernalia of government. But in the north, they will appoint a resident. But before they appoint that resident, they have the local emirs who became larger than life. So when those emirs, they make money, they pay their own part to the British they pay their own part to the British government. And once they've paid their own part to the British government, they can then use it for other things. So before we go there, let's quickly go back to the Yoruba rule. That's on page 13. So the Yoruba government, the Yoruba numbering over 1 million. So mind you, the Ondo part was not part of this. They didn't count them as part of the Yorubas. The Ekiti was not part of it. Ilorin was not part. Okunland was not part, and then the Riverine in Ondo State was not part. So for the Oyo part, they have Bale. They call them Bali, but we know it's Bale. So they have Bale, who were like second in command to the Alafin. A lot of Yoruba call them Ajeles. So what the Alafin has done is Alafin has quite a lot of Ajeles in all the lands. And all these Ajeles and Bales, sometimes this land, they revolt and say, no, we don't want any Ajeles. And sometimes they have these Bales. And these Bales sometimes themselves revolt against the Alafin, or they go beyond what they've sent them to do, what they themselves want to do, not necessarily what the Alaafin has instructed them to do. And even at that, there was no attempt to educate the people and to educate the government official on law and order. So the populated areas like Isheyin, Ikirun, Oshogbo, Ogbomoso, sometimes they also displayed tendency of separation under their own balance as well, even though they were supposed to be under the Alaafin and taking directives from the Alaafin. So I've talked about the way the North is being governed and what they do. So if we go to page 14 on item 23, we will see house rule. We'll see house rule. So if we go quickly into the house rule, if we still have time, I think we've still got about some 10, 12 minutes. And then I'll talk about that system in item 24. And that could probably be where we would round it up. Now, house rule. This house rule was about Lagos. And I don't know why he brought it into the mix now, but it's there, so we're going to look at it. Now, this house rule, what happened was in Lagos, the way they govern Lagos was very funny. They have a big man who is he has a native, well, they call him native, like traditional. I'll use traditional. So they has these house chiefs, and those house chiefs, if there is any issue, anything that's happened, they take these matters to this house chief, and this house chief, they were the one who would rule on what happened, who is right and who is wrong. And these house chiefs, they've always prevented the British cargo or British goods from going into the hinterland, into the Yoruba space to sell. So for instance, if anything comes to Lagos, it is these house chiefs that will first take it and then go sell it. So they were like the middlemen. They will go sell it, make money. So that made them so rich and powerful. So they will take it, carry it into the hinterland. They have boats, they have means of transportations and everything. And now, if they arrest you, you are going to pay £50 then to these house chiefs. Imagine £50. It's like multiply. Well, if we say we're multiplying it by 122, which is today's money, that's about 500 and something or 600-700 pounds. Fine. And we are collecting it in multiple forms. It's more or less like the return of Agberos. So, Oto need receipt. You just go collect the money and put it running into billions. So that's what the house chiefs were doing. So when Lugard modified the ordinances in 1912, he recognized the members and that these people, because those people, if you can't pay, they arrest you. So he said, no, this is another form of slavery, and it has to stop. Otherwise, it can be punishable under the law, and these people would stay in prison or be fined. So he was able to repeal that part on the 1st of January 1915. So it took him another 1 year after the amalgamation to really stop that house rule of 18. So that everything now, what Lugard was trying is, if anybody offend you, go to the court. If anybody offend you, go to the court. Let them have a judge there to judge the matter and say this person is right or this person is wrong. So it's more like making things more effective and more better. So Lugard now talked about the system of native administration in the north, which is perhaps where we would end today. So he talks about the system of government in the north. So, like I explained the other day, the other time, he said the system of native administration in the separate government of northern Nigeria had been based on recognition of the authority of the native chiefs. So what the government do is they bring independent chiefs, but they are dependent. So they are independent chiefs, but they are dependent. So what that means is that Britain relied on these chiefs. So in essence, Lugard is looking at this place is not profitable. There's no money to be made in the north, but he needs them because of the landmass they got, which we'll see in the document later. Lugard was thinking to use majority of the northern land as agricultural land. Because if we remember, Britain colonized America and they were using it for tobacco, cotton, sugarcane, and all sorts. So that's what they used America for. And now that they've lost America, they were thinking in their mind, but we'll come back into it in the later episode. They were thinking if they come back, if they have the opportunity, they would start doing all those things again. He tried it in the north. Some crops he was able to plant or grow, and some he was not able. So he was able to grow granite in the north, but he was not able to convince the locals to grow cotton. Because for cotton, the yield was not as much as what they would get in granite. For the south, it was a no-no because we had cocoa, which produced 10 times more revenue than even granite. So how will you then convince them to grow cotton and things? So that's when we get to that aspect. So what he did instead was he appointed a political officer. So what that political officer would do, it was irregular. It was not the usual style, but he favored them. So he favored them. So anything that happened to the northern citizens is whatever their emirs and their rulers or their leaders have said. It's not what Britain gave them that power to do whatever they want to. But this is how much you must pay us from the coffers to then run the government, to build schools, build roads, basically run the government. So it's just like take the taxes, and out of the taxes, come and remit this for us, which we would use to administer the country. So the taxes raised were raised in the name of the native ruler and not in the name of the country, Nigeria. And that system is still been going on today. So you see so many powerful northerners, when they tell you that there are no minerals in the north, it's a lie. They've got quite a lot of minerals, but it is in the hands of individuals. So those individuals, they have the power to take whatever they want, wherever they want in the north, share it. And this government, this colonial government, which said they've given you your independence, but you've not got your freedom and independence, still doing that till today. So those rulers in the north were given the free hand to take whatever they can, whatever they want, and they take it. And so the duty of the residents, which is like for the provinces, told you we have 13 provinces. It's not any duty of any man to say, okay, you want to go and question what the emirs are doing. That is not your job. The duty of the resident is just like a watchman to go and see what is going on, which is different from what is going on in the south. And that is what that was the system they used in Erba land as well. So they appointed a resident to monitor the Alaki now. Remember, the Alaki is his own king, he has his own domain, and just because he's gone to British government to say, please come and help me maintain law and order here, they brought him under the jurisdiction of Nigeria on the 16th of September 1941, which was different from when the North and the South were amalgamated on the 1st of January 1914. So we need to understand this very well so that we don't get confused today when people say, oh, no, no, Nigeria as it is, the constituent Nigerians did not agree to say, oh, we want to be a part of a Nigeria. It was Britain under the watchful eyes of Lugard, who was doing his own thing. Even when Churchill told him it's not going to work. How can you amalgamate two people who you don't? It's just like in the UK now. They've tried to make the country one, and there's been so many fractions. And they say, okay, you know what? Wales, go and do your own thing. Go and have your own Welsh police. Go and have your own schools. Run it how you want to run it. Go and have your own hospitals. Run it how you want to run it. Scotland, go and do the same thing. Northern Ireland, go and do the same thing. England, do your own thing. And then they cooperate on very few places like immigration, defense, and different other areas, policy areas that pertain to the entirety of the country. So that is what they were doing. So the residents in the south were actually leading, whereas the residents in the north were not, they are just watchmen for Britain. The emirs were given a free hand to do whatever they do. So what he did, he said the system is clearly only adapted to its fullest ability to communities under the centralized rule of a paramount chief. So they centralize everything. That's the problem Nigeria is now having, because the North has been ruled in a separate way, the South has been ruled in a separate way. And now, when Britain wanted to go, it was a clash of ideas that how do we make this work? There's no way it can work. They came up with okay, let's adopt maybe a federal system and see whether it would work. Germany is using federal system. So many countries are using federal system. So it's not only United States that are using federal system. So maybe if they can use federal system, maybe it would work. But these same Northerners said no, they don't like that federal system. They don't want to be a part of this. They want to leave. And today, they jettison that federal system and they are now using a centralized system under one person. And that is why you see that the president of Nigeria is perhaps one of the most powerful presidents in the world because of that northern system that they have allowed to continue since colonial times. And that is the greatest problem Nigeria is having today. So I'm going to end the analysis here, and hopefully we would come on Wednesday and we will continue from revenue, how they generated their revenue, what they generated, and what it is being used for. So how the taxes applied in the north and how the taxes applied in the south. So when it was amalgamated together, there was no more customs border in Erba land. There was no more customs border entering the north. So everything was now centralized. So the custom duties were supposed to be coming from the south and from the border around French Sudan, bordered Niger, what we call Niger today, Chad, and Cameroon. So until I come your way again next week, remain blessed. Thank you.
lọ́jọ́kọ́jọ́ làbẹ́wé kúkú dùkú lóko Podium International wọ́n ti wà tipẹ́tipẹ́ látìgbà tí wọ́n ti ń bàbọ̀ wọn ò fìgbà kan tẹ́rì o wọ́n ti wá ṣe bẹ̀bẹ̀ wọ́n ti gbé bẹ̀bẹ̀ dé Podium Cinema ni wọ́n tún gbé dé Podium Cinema lórí YouTube ẹ fọ́lọ̀ wọn kẹ́ ẹ láìkì wọn kẹ́ ẹ subscribe ibẹ̀ lẹ́tì mọ̀ wọ àwọn àdé àbálẹ̀ fíìmù ẹ̀dọ̀kí fíìmù tó léfo gan tààrà Podium Cinema mo bẹ́rí fún yín fíìmù 9 ọ̀tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ ni wọ́n kó jáde o àwọn gbàǹkọ́gbé fíìmù èkíní májẹ̀mú ẹ̀gbọ́n èkejì my wet ẹ̀kẹta ọmọ ẹni ẹ̀kẹrin àlàmú èkó ẹ̀karùn-ún àìmọ̀ ṣe wá rí pé nǹkan kì í ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ ràgó ó kọjá bẹ́ẹ̀ eléyìí lẹ́ti kẹjù èdè Yorùbá ni wọ́n fi ṣe àwọn fíìmù yìí ẹlẹ́ẹ̀kẹfà sẹ́ẹ̀kẹsàn-án èdè òyìnbó ni wọ́n kọ́ ẹ̀kẹfà tẹ́mà èkeje the casting ẹ̀kẹjọ M1 the detective ẹ̀kẹsàn 100 M1 the detective at 100 orí síríìsì lẹ́fì máa wò ó ìyẹn dàgbéléwò nìyẹn Podium International Podium Cinema ẹ fọ́lọ̀ wọn kẹ́ ẹ láìkì wọn lórí YouTube wọ́n wà lórí Facebook wọ́n wà lórí Instagram Podium Cinema ó ti dọbẹ̀ ẹ subscribe.